The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. Broken pelvis, mild concussion. Snow still in my boots when they cut them off. I remember lying there in Vale, staring at the ceiling tiles, and hearing my son's wife whisper outside my hospital room, "We can't cancel Aspen. It's $22,000, non-refundable." My son didn't argue. He just said, "Dad will understand." For 9 years, I had been sending them $8,000 every month. 9 years. That's $864,000, plus the house worth nearly $1 million. I smiled from my hospital bed, and I stopped the transfers that same night. 3 days later, I received an email from a lawyer I had never met. Subject line, power of attorney. That was when I realized this wasn't about a ski accident. Quick note, this is a fictional story with dramatized elements for storytelling and educational value. If you're watching tonight, let me know in the comments where you are and what time it is there. And please take care of your health. Water and rest matter more than we think. Because what my son tried next wasn't an accident at all. I should probably tell you who I am, because none of this makes sense without that part. My name is Victor Lawson. I'm 68 years old. I built Lawson Supply from a rented garage in Colorado Springs 32 years ago. Back then, I had one pickup truck, a borrowed forklift, and a line of credit that kept me awake at night. Today, the company clears a little over $6 million a year. Not glamorous, not flashy, but solid, earned. I believed in work. Too much, maybe. When my son Kyle was 10, I missed his championship baseball game because a shipment of drywall got stuck in Pueblo. I told myself I was building his future. He told his mother I didn't care. He wasn't entirely wrong. Money became my apology. College tuition, $96,000. An SUV when he married Olivia, $48,000. The down payment on the house they live in now, nearly $1 million in today's market. And then the monthly transfers, $8,000. Quietly, automatically, every first of the month. Kyle never asked outright. He would just sigh on the phone. "Things are tight, Dad." Olivia would add, "We're just trying to keep up." Keep up with what? I never quite knew. From the outside, they looked successful. Nice neighborhood, vacation photos in Aspen, a kitchen remodel that cost more than my first year in business. Inside, though, there was always tension. Kyle wanted to prove he wasn't living in my shadow. Olivia wanted security she never had growing up. I understood both of them. That's the problem. 3 days after I got home from the hospital, I was sitting in my study with a cane by my chair. Snow still melting in the yard. My body hurt in places I didn't know existed, but my mind was clear, too clear. My grandson Mason came by that afternoon, 12 years old, thin, serious, always carrying some kind of circuit board or notebook. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. "Grandpa, Dad said if you get confused, we're supposed to help you sign stuff." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain, something colder. "What kind of stuff?" I asked. He shrugged. "Important stuff, so it doesn't go to waste." Go to waste. That night, I opened my laptop and read the email again. A formal request. Evaluation. Temporary financial guardianship. All neatly worded, professional. Kyle's name was on it. Olivia's, too. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt responsible. Because if a son believes his father is only a wallet, maybe that lesson was taught slowly, over decades. Still, there are lines you don't cross. The next morning, I called my attorney, Laura Benton. "Laura," I said, steady as I could manage, It's time to review the trust. There was a pause on the other end, and then she asked a question that made everything very real. Victor, did they actually file it? Laura didn't waste time. They filed for temporary conservatorship this morning, she said, calm, clinical, the way surgeons speak before cutting. I stood by the window with my cane pressed into the carpet. Outside, the mountains looked clean and white. Inside, everything felt gray. On what grounds? I asked. Alleged cognitive decline following head trauma. Head trauma. I let that word sit there for a moment. I had balanced payroll spreadsheets in my hospital bed. I remembered the exact interest rate on Kyle's mortgage. I could still recite every employee's start date from memory. But according to the petition, I might not know what day it was. Laura cleared her throat. Victor, this is aggressive. Whoever advised them wants leverage. Whoever. We both knew who that was. Olivia had always been careful with words, polite, organized, efficient. But there was steel behind her smile. She grew up watching her parents lose their house twice before she turned 15. She told me once, quietly, security isn't optional. It's survival. Kyle heard fear. I heard ambition. That afternoon, I did something that might surprise you. I slowed down. When Kyle came by to check on me, I let my voice trail off mid-sentence. I asked him what day it was. I pretended to forget the name of our accountant. His shoulders relaxed. You should rest, Dad, he said gently. We just want to make sure things are handled. Handled. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. 38 years old. Same nervous habit of rubbing his thumb against his ring finger when he's unsure. He wasn't cruel. He was scared. Scared of falling behind. Scared of failing. Scared of not being enough. And Olivia knew exactly where to press. When he left, I walked back to my study and locked the door. Laura arrived an hour later with a leather folder and a witness from her office. We reviewed every asset, the company shares, the investment accounts, the house Kyle thought was fully transferred. I had set up a revocable trust 3 years ago, quietly, after overhearing Olivia say, "One day it'll all be ours anyway." That sentence stayed with me. The trust had conditions, clear ones. If any beneficiary attempted legal control through incapacity claims, support would cease immediately. I signed the updated documents with steady hands. "Do you want to fight this in court?" Laura asked. "No," I said. "I want them to think they're winning." 2 days later, the preliminary hearing was scheduled. That evening, Mason came by again. He brought a small metal object wrapped in cloth. "My dad pawned this," he whispered. I unfolded the cloth. It was the old silver pocket watch I gave Kyle when he graduated college. I felt something break. Quietly. Somewhere deep. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Mason looked down at the floor. "Because I don't think Dad knows who he's becoming." That was the moment I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about money, it was about time. And time was about to expose all of us. The morning of the hearing. Olivia smiled at me across the courtroom, like she had already calculated the outcome. She had no idea what was written inside the trust. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and old paper, the kind of place where voices echo even when you whisper. I walked in with a cane and a straight back. Kyle stood beside Olivia. He looked tired, not angry, just strained. Olivia, on the other hand, looked composed. Navy suit, hair pulled tight, legal folder held close to her chest, like armor. She gave me a small nod. Not warm, not hostile, calculated. Their attorney opened first. "Your Honor, Mr. Victor Lawson suffered a traumatic fall while skiing in Vail. Since then, there have been noticeable cognitive lapses. My clients are concerned about his ability to manage complex financial affairs. Concerned? I almost smiled. Laura stood beside me, hands folded. She didn't rush. She waited. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Lawson, do you understand why you're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, evenly. "My son believes I'm confused." There was a faint shift in the room. Olivia didn't look at me. Kyle did. The opposing attorney began listing examples: missed calls, delayed responses, moments where I allegedly asked what month it was, all carefully documented, all real because I had staged them. I leaned forward slightly. "May I ask my son a question?" The judge allowed it. I looked at Kyle. "What was the interest rate on your mortgage when I co-signed it?" He blinked. 4.1? 4.08, I said softly. 30-year fixed. We refinanced in 2021. A few heads turned. I continued. "How much have I transferred to you over the past 9 years?" Kyle swallowed. I didn't wait for him to answer. $8,000 per month. That's $864,000. Silence. Olivia shifted in her seat. Laura stepped forward. "Your Honor, we have a full neurological evaluation from Dr. Samuel Reed. Mr. Lawson demonstrates no cognitive impairment." Dr. Reed testified calmly. "Clinical. Precise." The judge nodded. The opposing attorney tried once more. "We believe there is still risk." That's when Laura placed something on the evidence table. A printed transcript. "Hospital hallway recording," she said. 3 days after the accident. Olivia's head snapped up. Laura read aloud. "We can't cancel Aspen. It's $22,000. Non-refundable." The room went very still. Kyle closed his eyes. Olivia spoke before she could stop herself. "That was taken out of context." Laura didn't raise her voice. "It was taken in context." The judge looked down at the documents for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Temporary conservatorship is denied." Just like that. Denied. Kyle exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Olivia's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her folder. As we stood to leave, she leaned toward Kyle and whispered something I couldn't fully hear. But I caught 2 words. "We appeal." Outside the courthouse, the wind was sharp. Kyle approached me slowly. "Dad, this didn't have to go this far." I looked at him. "You signed it." His jaw tightened. "We were just trying to protect things." "Protect what?" I asked. "The money or yourselves?" He didn't answer. Across the parking lot, Olivia was already on her phone. By the time I got home, Laura had called. "They've filed notice to escalate," she said. "And Victor, there's something else." I lowered myself into my chair. "What is it?" "They're claiming the house was an outright gift." I stared at the mountains outside my window. It wasn't. And they had never read the fine print. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid of losing the case, but because I kept replaying something Laura had said before she left. They're claiming the house was an outright gift. An outright gift. That house in Briargate wasn't just brick and drywall. I walked every frame before it went up. I negotiated the land. I signed the construction invoices myself. The appraisal last year came in at $980,000. I never transferred full ownership. I transferred usage. There's a difference. The next afternoon, Kyle called. His voice was quieter than usual. "Dad, can we talk?" "Of course," I said. He came alone. No Olivia. No attorney. Just my son. He stood in my living room like a man stepping into a courtroom without counsel. His eyes went straight to the shelf where the silver pocket watch used to sit. "You got it back," he said. "Yes." He nodded slowly. Then he sat down. I didn't know she was going to push this far. "She?" I asked. Kyle rubbed his face. "Olivia thinks if we don't secure things now, we'll never have stability." "And what do you think?" I asked. He hesitated. I don't want to be the guy who only survives because his father keeps sending money." There it was. Not greed, pride, misguided pride, but real. I leaned back carefully, my hips still aching when I shifted. "I offered you half the monthly support if you withdrew the petition." "I know. Why didn't you?" He looked at the floor. "She said if we stepped back, you'd rewrite everything." I let out a slow breath. "Kyle, I already did." His head snapped up. "What?" "I rewrote things 3 years ago." He stared at me like he'd misheard. "What does that mean?" "It means the house was never unconditional." Silence. The air in the room felt thinner. "What are you saying?" he whispered. "I'm saying the property agreement included a life use clause. It remains under my trust." His face went pale. "That's not possible." "It is." He stood abruptly. "Olivia reviewed the paperwork." "No," I said gently. "She reviewed what you told her." That hit him harder than anything else. He paced once across the rug. "You're doing this to teach me a lesson." "I'm doing this because you filed to declare me incompetent." He stopped moving. I didn't think it would go that far. But it did. We stood there. Two men bound by blood and ego. After a long moment, Kyle spoke again. "If I withdraw now, will you restore everything?" I studied him. There was still a window open, small, fragile. "I would restore trust," I said, "not the transfers." His jaw tightened. "That's not enough." There it was again. Security, the same word Olivia used. The same fear she fed. Kyle left without shaking my hand. That evening, Mason came by after school. He carried a robotics kit under his arm. "Grandpa, I qualified for regionals," he said, trying to smile. "That's good news." "Dad didn't come to the last one," I swallowed. "Will you?" "Yes," I said. "I will." He hesitated before leaving. "Grandpa, if people make bad choices, can they fix them?" I looked at him for a long time before answering. "Sometimes, if they fix them early." The next morning, Laura called. They officially filed a motion claiming the Briargate house was an unconditional transfer, she said. "They're arguing intent." "Intent," I repeated. "Yes, and Victor. They're requesting discovery on all your financial decisions in the past decade." That meant payroll, contracts, donations, everything. I stared at the mountains outside my window again. "They're going all in," Laura added. "Yes," I said quietly. "So are we." 2 days later, I received certified mail, a formal notice. Kyle and Olivia were seeking damages, claiming financial coercion. I sat at my desk and opened the trust binder slowly. They thought they understood the rules. They didn't. And when the court reviewed the original trust provisions in full, everything was about to change. The second hearing felt different, not tense, sharper. This time, Kyle and Olivia weren't arguing that I was confused. They were arguing that I had manipulated them, that the monthly transfers and the housing arrangement created a dependency I later weaponized. Financial coercion. That was the phrase their attorney used. I sat there and listened, as though they were describing a stranger. "He controlled access to funds," the attorney said. He encouraged reliance and then withdrew support to punish them. Punish. The word landed heavier than I expected. Laura stood slowly when it was our turn. "Your Honor," she began, "voluntary support is not coercion. Mr. Lawson provided assistance without contractual obligation. The trust documents, which predate the accident by 3 years, clearly outline conditional provisions." She handed the judge a thick binder, the original trust. Kyle shifted in his seat. Olivia stared straight ahead, jaw set. The judge flipped pages deliberately. Laura continued. Clause 14b. Any beneficiary who initiates legal action seeking incapacity-based control forfeits discretionary support immediately. The judge looked up. "Is that accurate?" "Yes, Your Honor," Laura replied. "It is explicit." Kyle turned toward Olivia. "You said it was a gift," he whispered. Olivia didn't look at him. "It was supposed to be," she said under her breath. There it was. The crack. The opposing attorney attempted one more angle. "Intent matters, Mr. Lawson created expectations." I cleared my throat. "May I speak?" The judge nodded. "I built a business from nothing," I said evenly. "I chose to help my son. That help came with responsibility, not ownership. I never transferred title. I transferred opportunity." The room was silent again. Then Dr. Samuel Reed testified for a second time. Clinical, neutral. He confirmed I demonstrated no cognitive impairment, no executive dysfunction, no diminished capacity. The judge leaned back in his chair. "I find no evidence of coercion or incapacity," he said. "The petition is denied in full." Denied in full. Kyle looked like the air had been pulled from his lungs. Olivia's composure slipped for half a second, just enough to reveal something close to panic. But it wasn't over. As we gathered our documents, Olivia leaned toward her attorney. "File the appeal," she said quietly. Kyle stared at her. "We can't afford this," he muttered. "We can't afford not to," she replied. Outside the courthouse, wind whipped through the parking lot. Reporters weren't there. This wasn't that kind of case. But word would spread. It always does in business circles. Kyle approached me again. "Dad, please, we'll work this out privately." "We tried that," I said. He lowered his voice. "Olivia thinks if we lose the house, everything collapses." "And what do you think?" He hesitated. "I think it already has." For a moment, I almost reached out. Almost. But then, Laura stepped beside me. "Victor," she said quietly, "they're escalating discovery. They want access to your full financial history, company records included." I nodded. "Let them see it." Laura studied me. "You're certain?" "Yes. If they wanted transparency, they would have it." That evening, I drove past the Briargate house for the first time since the hearing. The lights were on. 2 cars in the driveway, curtains drawn. From the outside, it still looked stable. Inside, I knew the numbers were shifting. The bank had already sent them a notice. 60 days past due. The $8,000 transfers were gone. The cushion was gone. The illusion was thinning. 3 nights later, I received a text from Mason. "Grandpa, Mom and Dad are fighting a lot." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "I'm here if you need me." A minute passed. Then another message came. "Dad said if he loses this house, he loses everything." I put the phone down slowly. That wasn't true. But somewhere along the way, Kyle had convinced himself it was. The appeal hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. And when the court reviewed the trust in full, including the amendment I added after the hospital hallway recording, Olivia would finally understand something she had underestimated. Control only works when you read every line. The appeal hearing drew more attention than the first two combined, not from reporters, but from people who mattered. Two members of my company's board attended. A regional bank representative sat quietly in the back. Word had spread that the Lawson Trust might be challenged. In business, uncertainty is blood in the water. Olivia walked in first. Not hurried, not rattled, controlled. Kyle followed a few steps behind her. He looked thinner. His suit hung looser than it had a month ago. He avoided my eyes. When the session began, their attorney presented a new argument. Your Honor, while the original trust predates the accident, the amendment filed after hospitalization raises questions of intent. We contend Mr. Lawson altered the terms in retaliation. Retaliation. Laura didn't react. She simply stood and slid another document across the table. The amendment clarifies language, she said. It does not introduce new forfeiture conditions. Clause 14B was present in the original trust, executed 3 years prior. The judge adjusted his glasses. 3 years prior? Yes, Your Honor. Olivia's composure flickered for the first time. That's not accurate, she said sharply before her attorney could stop her. Laura opened the binder to the notarized page. Signed, witnessed, dated. The date was unmistakable. 3 years ago. Long before Vale. Long before Aspen. Kyle leaned toward Olivia. You told me the trust was simple, he whispered. It was supposed to be, she replied under her breath. The judge turned to Kyle. Mr. Lawson, were you aware of these provisions? Kyle hesitated. No, Your Honor. Laura spoke gently. Mr. Lawson was provided a summary document at the time of the housing agreement. The life use clause is clearly stated. The judge nodded slowly. The air shifted. Then Laura did something I hadn't told her to do, but I was glad she did. She requested permission to submit the original email chain between Kyle and me from 3 years ago. The subject line read, "Temporary support until you're stable." The judge skimmed the printout. Kyle's own words were there. I don't want this forever, Dad. Just until we get steady. Not forever, temporary. The room felt smaller. Olivia's attorney attempted one last push. Intent can evolve. Mr. Lawson may have changed his position after the accident. That was when Laura placed the final piece of paper on the table. The hospital hallway transcript. Not just the line about Aspen. The entire exchange. Kyle's voice. We can't handle this right now. Maybe if the paperwork goes through, things are simpler. The judge looked up slowly. Paperwork? Silence. Olivia folded her hands tighter. The judge exhaled. I find no evidence that Mr. Lawson altered his trust in bad faith. The appeal is denied. Denied, not partial, not conditional. Denied. The sound of that word echoed longer than it should have. Kyle didn't move for several seconds. Then he stood, slowly, like someone waking from anesthesia. Outside, in the courthouse corridor, he finally spoke. You set this up, he said quietly. Not accusing, not angry, just tired. I protected what I built, I replied. He stared at the floor tiles. I thought if I secured it, I'd finally feel independent. You don't get independence by seizing it, I said. You build it. He let out a bitter laugh. Like you did? Yes. Olivia stepped in then. This isn't over, she said. You may have won legally, but you just destroyed your son. I held her gaze. No, I said calmly. He chose this path. Kyle didn't defend her. He didn't defend me. He just walked toward the exit. That afternoon, Laura called with confirmation. The appeal is closed. They're liable for court costs. $18,400. Another number. Another wait. That evening, Mason texted again. Grandpa, Dad says we might have to sell the house. I stared at the message for a long time, because for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not triumph. Something heavier. And when I opened the updated trust summary one more time, I knew the next decision would define everything that followed. The foreclosure notice came on a Thursday. Certified mail. Thick envelope. Red print across the top. 60 days past due. Kyle didn't call me. He didn't have to. The bank manager, a man I've known for 20 years, did. Victor, he said quietly, they're exposed. Without the monthly transfers, their debt ratio doesn't hold. Debt ratio. It's a clean term. Clinical. Harmless sounding. It means they built a life that only worked if I kept wiring $8,000 on the first of every month. I drove past the Briargate house again that evening. Lawn still trimmed, porch light on. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. 3 days later, Mason showed up unannounced. He didn't knock right away, just stood on the porch with his robotics backpack hanging off one shoulder. I opened the door before he pressed the bell. Hey, champ. He stepped inside slowly. They're fighting, he said. About money, about blame, about who pushed too hard and who didn't push enough. Dad says Mom made him do it, Mason added. And what do you think? I asked. He shrugged. I think Dad wanted to prove something. That hurt more than the lawsuit. Kyle came later that night. He didn't sit down. We got an offer, he said. Under market, $850. For a house appraised at $980, I replied. He nodded. We don't have options. He looked older than 38 in that moment. Lines around his eyes that weren't there last year. Olivia's moving out, he said quietly. Temporary. Temporary. The same word he used in that email 3 years ago. Where will you go? I asked. I don't know. There it was. The truth stripped down. No strategy, no leverage. Just a man who miscalculated. I never wanted to take everything from you, I said. You didn't, he replied. You just stopped giving. Silence settled between us. I thought if I controlled the money, he continued, I'd finally feel secure. And do you? He shook his head. No. The next week, the house officially went on the market. A for sale sign in front of a place I once walked through with pride. Mason called me the night before his regional robotics competition. Grandpa, if we lose the house, does that mean Dad failed? I took a breath before answering. No, I said carefully. It means he gambled on the wrong foundation. Can foundations be rebuilt? He asked. Yes, I said, if you're willing to start lower. The competition was held in a high school gym in Denver. Folding chairs, metal bleachers, parents filming on phones. Kyle didn't come. Olivia didn't either. I sat in the front row. Mason's robot completed the course in 32 seconds flat. Clean run, no penalties. He looked at me from across the gym, searching for approval. I stood and clapped first. Later that evening, Laura called. Victor, the property sale won't clear their debts fully, she said. They're upside down after legal fees. How much? 42,000 short. 42,000. A number that used to be irrelevant in my world. Not anymore. 2 nights later, Olivia filed for legal separation. Kyle called me at midnight. She says I ruined everything, he said. What do you think? I asked. There was a long pause on the line. I think I thought you'd never really let us fall." That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended, because for the first time, I wondered whether I had mistaken discipline for distance. The house closed 3 weeks later. Kyle moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near the highway. Mason's room shrank by half, and the trust documents on my desk suddenly felt heavier than they ever had. Laura sent over a draft summary of the final distribution structure. I stared at one particular line for a long time. 20%. Education allocation. Irrevocable. When I signed that amendment, there would be no going back. The amendment meeting was scheduled for a Monday morning. Gray sky, low clouds, the kind of weather that makes decisions feel heavier than they already are. Laura laid the updated trust documents across the conference table. 3 folders, one for me, one for the records, one that would eventually be disclosed. "Before you sign," she said, "I need to confirm intent again. This amendment allocates 20% of your estate into an irrevocable educational trust for Mason. Restricted access until age 25. Tuition, housing, research grants only." I nodded. "And the remainder?" I asked quietly. "The charitable foundation remains at 40%. The balance stays under discretionary review." Discretionary review. Kyle's name was no longer automatic anywhere in that structure. My hand hovered over the pen. For 30 years, I built everything assuming it would flow downward without question. Blood first, logic second. Now, I was reversing that order. "I'm not punishing him," I said more to myself than to Laura. "You're creating conditions," she replied. I signed. The ink dried in less than a minute, but it changed the next 30 years. 2 days later, the separation filing became public record. Olivia moved into a downtown condo, lease under her own name. Kyle stayed in the apartment near the highway. He didn't tell Mason everything, but Mason wasn't blind. "Dad sleeps on the couch sometimes," he said during one of our dinners. "Why?" "He says the bedroom feels too quiet." I didn't ask more. Instead, I showed Mason how to rebalance a simple portfolio on my tablet. Compound interest, risk spread, long-term thinking. "These aren't just numbers," I told him. "They're decisions you make when no one is watching." He listened. He always listened. A week later, Kyle asked to meet. Not at my house, at a diner halfway between us. He looked exhausted. "I got laid off," he said before the coffee arrived. "The firm downsized. Performance metrics. Market contraction." "Do you believe that?" I asked gently. He stared at the table. "I think I was distracted." There it was, not blaming Olivia, not blaming me, himself. "I thought I could handle it all," he continued. "The house, the lawsuit, proving something to you." "You didn't need to prove anything," I said. "That's not how it felt growing up." That sentence landed harder than the foreclosure notice ever did. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You were always ahead, always building. I felt like I was chasing your shadow." I sat back. I had never considered that the support I gave later in life might have grown out of the pressure I created earlier. "That wasn't my intention," I said. "Intent doesn't erase impact," he replied quietly. We sat with that. No anger, just wait. When the check came, I paid. Not as a statement, as a habit. 3 weeks passed. Job applications, rejections, silence. Then came the call at 2:17 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Victor Lawson?" "Yes." "This is Officer Reynolds. We found your number listed as emergency contact." My chest tightened. "There's been an incident involving Kyle." The word incident echoed louder than it should have. "He's alive," the officer added quickly. But we need you to come down. The hospital hallway was colder than the one after my accident. Different wing, same smell. Kyle sat in a chair outside the ER room, head in his hands. Not injured, just hollow. What happened? I asked. He didn't look up. I couldn't sleep, he said. I drove. I didn't know where. The officer filled in the rest. Car parked near a bridge overlook. Engine running. No movement for over an hour. A patrol car noticed, knocked on the window. Kyle finally lifted his head. I didn't do anything, he said quickly. I just sat there. I studied his face. There was no performance in it, no strategy, just a man who had lost the version of himself he thought he was supposed to be. Mason doesn't know, he whispered. He won't, I replied. The officer cleared his throat. We're recommending an evaluation, he said. Kyle nodded. Not resistant, not defensive, just tired. As we walked toward the exit, Kyle stopped. I thought money disappearing was the worst part, he said. Turns out it was the identity disappearing. I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure if I had helped strip that identity or forced him to rebuild it. When I dropped him at his apartment, he didn't go inside immediately. He looked at me. Did you ever think about quitting? He asked. Yes, I said honestly. More times than you know. What stopped you? Responsibility, I replied. Not pride. He nodded slowly, and as I drove away, I realized something uncomfortable. The legal battle had ended, but something far more fragile had just begun. Kyle agreed to the evaluation, voluntarily. That detail mattered more than he understood. The psychiatrist's office sat on the third floor of a plain brick building. No grand lobby, no dramatic setting, just beige walls and soft lighting. Kyle went in alone. I waited in the parking lot. 38 minutes, I counted. When he came back out, he didn't look broken. He looked stripped down. They say it's acute depression, he said, once he got into my truck. Triggered by loss of status and prolonged stress. Status. There was that word again. And? I asked. They recommend weekly sessions, medication optional. Will you go? I asked. He nodded. I don't want Mason seeing me like that again. That was the first sentence in weeks that sounded like a father. 3 days later, Laura called. Victor, there's something you need to know. Her tone wasn't alarmed, just precise. Olivia filed a financial disclosure in her separation case. She listed the lawsuit and the trust loss as primary damages. I stayed silent. She's framing it as reckless estate manipulation that destabilized the marriage. And? She's subpoenaing portions of the trust communications. I leaned back in my chair. Can she? She can try. There it was. Not another legal attack from Kyle, from Olivia. Twist number 1 was about money. Twist number 2 was about narrative. Olivia wasn't after assets anymore. She was after story control. Laura and I met that afternoon. We respond with transparency, she said. Full timeline, original execution date, pre-accident provisions. And the hospital transcript? Only if necessary. I nodded. The next week, during mediation for the separation, Olivia spoke directly to Kyle. You let him dismantle us, she said. No, Kyle replied calmly. We dismantled ourselves. That was new. She stared at him like she didn't recognize the man sitting across from her. You think therapy fixes bankruptcy? She asked sharply. It fixes blame, he answered. I watched from the back of the room, quiet, observing. For the first time, Kyle wasn't defending me. He wasn't attacking her. He was owning his part. That mattered. Outside the courthouse, Mason stood beside me. They're not yelling, he said. No, I replied. They're choosing. Is that better? He asked. Sometimes, I said. It's harder. 2 weeks later, the separation finalized. No alimony request. No further estate claims. Olivia walked away with what was legally hers and nothing more. Kyle kept the apartment. Mason split weeks. Life didn't collapse. It shrank. One evening, Kyle showed up at my house unannounced. Not desperate, not angry, just direct. I got an offer, he said. Construction project manager. Mid-level. 40% less salary than before. It's honest work, he added. It always was, I said. He looked around my study. The trust folder sat on the desk. He noticed it. I know what you did with the 20%, he said quietly. Yes. For Mason. Yes, he swallowed. I'm not asking you to change it. That was the smallest sentence, and the biggest shift. I want him to earn his place, Kyle continued, not inherit resentment. Resentment. That word cut deeper than lawsuit, foreclosure, or evaluation, because it meant he understood. I'll still show up, he said, even if it's small. Small isn't weak, I replied. Small is consistent. He nodded, then he hesitated. There's something else. I waited. I kept the hospital discharge summary, he said. The night after the bridge. My chest tightened. Why? I asked. To remember how close I came to letting everything end. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't threatening. He was factual. I won't do that again, he added. But I need to know you're not just testing me. Testing. That stung. I'm not testing you, I said carefully. I'm refusing to rescue you. There's a difference. He stood. Then maybe that's what I needed. After he left, I sat alone in the study. The trust amendment copy lay open. 20% educational allocation, 40% foundation, the rest, conditional. I could still modify it. Technically, legally, but emotionally, that was more complicated. Because sometimes justice feels clean in courtrooms and unfinished at dinner tables. The following morning, I received a voicemail. Unknown number. Male voice. Low. You think you won, Victor, but Kyle isn't built for this. The line went dead. I stared at the phone longer than I should have, because that voice wasn't Olivia's, and it wasn't random, which meant the story wasn't finished yet. I never returned the call. The unknown voice. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood something by then. Not every shadow needs a spotlight. Kyle started the new job 2 weeks later. Early shifts, long drives, hard hats and steel-toe boots instead of tailored jackets. The first Friday, he came by after work. Dust still on his sleeves. It's slower than I remember, he said. Real construction. No shortcuts. That's the point, I replied. He nodded. No bitterness, no blame, just fatigue and something steadier underneath. Mason adjusted too. Smaller room, different school pickup schedule. He complained once about the apartment's thin walls, then stopped. Children are more resilient than adults give them credit for. One Saturday, he brought over a notebook. I'm designing a solar charger, he said, for remote cabins. He looked at me carefully. Dad says you built everything from scratch. I built it brick by brick, I answered. Was it scary? Yes, I said. But fear is information. It tells you where to reinforce. He wrote that down. That night, alone in my study, I opened the trust summary again. 20% locked for education, 40% foundation, the remainder structured, but not erased. I realized something uncomfortable. For years, I believed generosity meant protection. After the accident, After the lawsuit, I thought discipline meant justice. But neither extreme is balance. Balance is boundaries with love. Kyle never asked me to restore the old arrangement. He stopped expecting rescue. And that, more than any court ruling, was the real shift. The depression didn't vanish overnight. Therapy became routine. There were setbacks, quiet days. A few late-night drives he told me about honestly. But there was no bridge again. No engine left running in the dark. One evening, he said something that stayed with me. "I thought losing the money was the punishment," he said. "Turns out losing who I thought I was, that was the lesson." I didn't answer immediately, because I had my own lesson to admit. I had tied my identity too tightly to being needed. When I stopped sending $8,000 a month, I thought I was teaching strength. In truth, I was learning detachment. Sometimes we rescue because we're afraid to watch someone struggle. Sometimes we withdraw because we're afraid to watch ourselves soften. Both can be mistakes. If you're listening to this and you've built a life from nothing, if you've carried more than anyone noticed, I understand the instinct to protect what you earned. But protection without accountability breeds entitlement. And accountability without compassion breeds distance. You need both. Today, the house in Briargate belongs to another family. The apartment near the highway still stands. The educational trust for Mason is locked and growing quietly, compounding like patience. Kyle works, slowly rebuilding, not spectacularly, but honestly. As for the voicemail, I let it fade. Because real change isn't proven by threats. It's proven by consistency. Thank you for listening and sharing this time with me today. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I'm always curious how far these stories travel. And if you made it to the end, rate this story from 1 to 10. Your feedback helps me create even stronger stories for you. Please note, this story contains fictionalized elements created for educational and entertainment purposes. If this story moved you even a little, another one is waiting on your screen. YouTube thinks you'll enjoy it, so take a look. So take a look. So take a look. So take a look.